In Lancashire on the M6, the southbound carriageway of the motorway has been closed from junction 33 to 32, heading away from Lancaster down to the M55. Following a serious accident, is queuing nearly back to junction 34 and en route through Lancaster and Garstang as you divert. On the M16 Greater Manchester, the clockwise entry slip is shut at junction 5 at Princes Parkway where a lorry's overturned, and right on the Warwickshire-Staffordshire border on the M42 southbound, a lane's closed to junction 10 at the A5 Tamworth exit, where a lorry broke down and left a spillage behind. Queues back to junction 11. On the Hertfordshire stretch of the M25, there are clockwise queues following an earlier crash just before Maple Cross. Is queuing back to the M40. On the M5 in Somerset, the inside lane shuts southbound, junction 24 near Bridgewater after a lorry broke down. That's the latest.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website, GBNews.com.
Don't miss your chance to win our Super Summer Giveaway. With your chance to win £30,000 cash, our biggest cash prize to date. Which means you get to spend every single penny however you like. What plans would you make with an extra £30,000 cash in your bank account? Take your family on the ultimate holiday, buy that treat that's always seemed out of reach, or just put it in the bank for a later date. However you'd spend it, make sure you don't miss out. For another chance to win £30,000 in tax-free cash, text CASH to 63232. Text costs £2 plus one standard network rate message. You can enter online at gbnews.com/win. Entries cost £2. Or post your name and number to GB07 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 5 p.m. on the 30th of August. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Your lunchtime update on the stories that matter across the UK.
From breaking news and insightful analysis, inspiring stories and lively debates.
You're comparing yourself to a former Prime Minister. Which is it?
Stay informed, stay updated, stay entertained.
I just don't know how anyone would not want to be there.
Every weekday from midday,
We are Good Afternoon Britain, only on GB News.
Britain's news channel.
Tune in to Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan.
GB News royalty with
Your perfect start to the weekend.
Lucky Us.
Feisty and fearless guests.
Well, I'm a normal person, so ask me.
Honest opinions.
That raises more questions than a Gary Barlow tax return.
And a few surprises along the way.
Might be cold in this studio.
That is Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan. 8 to 9, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
A very, very good evening to you and welcome to GBN Tonight with me, Martin Daubney. It's all over for Joe Biden as he announced he's pulled out of the US presidential race this year. Who will face Donald Trump? Can anybody beat him? Well, it's looking like it'll be Biden's Vice President Kamala Harris. She spoke just moments ago and paid tribute to her boss. More on that later. We've also got the lowdown on Kamala from Tom Del Beccaro, who ran against Kamala Harris to be Senator for California. Also today, Labour launched Skills England. They say it'll end the reliance on overseas workers, but with the Chancellor warning of tough decisions ahead, is the honeymoon period already over for the new government? Also, a new study reveals there were more than 1 million asylum seeker applications in the European Union last year alone. Why? We'll talk to a top immigration lawyer on that one. And blame it on the European Union. No, they're not the words of Nigel Farage, but Microsoft. The tech giant is pointing the blame at Brussels over last week's IT blackout. I was never a fan. Vladimir Putin would have been proud of that wipeout. Was actually that down to Brussels? Now get in touch with your thoughts on tonight's topics by visiting gbnews.com/your say. But for a meaty following hour, here's your news with Polly Middlehurst.
Martin, thank you, and good evening to you. Well, the head of the US Secret Service today admitted that the attempt to assassinate Donald Trump was the most significant operational US Secret Service failure for decades. Kimberly Cheetle has been testifying today before a congressional committee in an effort to explain herself following the attempt to kill Donald Trump last week. She was being questioned today about the security lapses that allowed a lone gunman to successfully take aim at Mr. Trump, saying she accepts full responsibility.
Assassination attempt of former President Donald Trump on July 13th is the most significant operational failure of the Secret Service in decades, and I am keeping him and his family in my thoughts. The Secret Service's solemn mission is to protect our nation's leaders. On July 13th, we failed.
Meanwhile, financial donations to the US Democrats have surged after President Biden's announcement he's stepping down from the US presidential race. In an online statement yesterday, Joe Biden endorsed his VP Vice President Kamala Harris as his favourite candidate for president. But similar endorsements were missing from the former President Obama and the prominent Democrat Nancy Pelosi. It comes after he faced increasing calls to step aside since his poor debate performance against Donald Trump last month. Here, though, the Prime Minister, Sir Keir Starmer, praised Joe Biden.
A man who, during 5 decades of service, never lost touch with the concerns of working people and always put his country first. A true friend of the Labour movement, his presidency will leave a legacy that extends far beyond America to freedom and security on this continent.
Well, the Home Secretary told the House of Commons today that the Rwanda scheme has cost the British taxpayer £700 million. Yvette Cooper described the migrant deterrence scheme as the most shocking waste of taxpayers' money she'd ever seen. She said she would take urgent action to start clearing the asylum backlog in one simple change that she said would save the taxpayer an estimated £7 billion over the next 10 years. That's after nearly 1,500 migrants arrived in the UK over the last week across the English Channel. And just lastly, the Prince and Princess of Wales have shared a new photograph of Prince George to mark his 11th birthday. The image was taken by his mum, Princess Catherine, and posted on Kensington Palace's social media accounts. The black and white shot shows the future king smiling, wearing a white shirt and a dark blazer. Very grown-up looking he is too. Happy birthday, George. Those are the latest GB News headlines for now. I'm Polly Middlehurst. I'm back in an hour. See you then.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Thank you, Polly. Now, welcome to GBN Tonight. I'm Martin Daubney. Well, it finally happened. After weeks of insisting he was still fit to lead, Joe Biden has finally dropped out of the 2024 presidential race. His Vice President Kamala Harris has thrown her hat in the ring. And last night, the Bidens and the Clintons both endorsed a last-minute campaign to take on Donald Trump in November. And let's cross now to Middletown, Ohio, where Trump's Vice President candidate J.D. Vance is speaking in his hometown at his first solo rally.
My grandmother, I could tell stories about my mom and my sister. I could tell stories about Aunt Wee. I know Aunt Wee's here. We've got so many great, I think all those people here, actually. I think Cheryl, where's Cheryl? You here, Cheryl? I love you, Cheryl. My stepmom. We just got so many good people who've been so good to me. But even if you cast a wider net, you know, Ron Selby was my math teacher in high school. Ron's got to be around here somewhere. I know he is. Now, I will tell a story. Now, I don't know if this story is actually true or if it's just the legend of Ron Selby. But Ron, if it's not true, don't tell me, because I've gone 21 years believing it, and I don't want to be contradicted now. But you know, the story is that at some point, Ron, of course, was a tough teacher. He demanded a lot of his students, and I was a beneficiary of that. But the story goes that at one point, Ron Selby had a student who really didn't want to take one of those world-famous Ron Selby math final exams. And so somebody called in a bomb threat to Middletown, Ohio School. So everybody goes outside, of course. Everybody remembers, was a student at one point or another. Well, you get a bomb threat, you got to go stand outside. The fire department comes. But Ron was really pissed off that somebody was messing with his schedule. So he walked to the kid's locker, got what was allegedly the bomb, threw it in a trash can and said, I know this kid, he's not smart enough to make a bomb. Let's get back to school. That's the legend of Ron Selby. I could go through half an hour and longer just talking about so many of you who made me who I am, and I'm so grateful to you. And I said at the RNC convention, which was the craziest speech and the craziest environment I've ever given, it's like all of you times 100 people, right? They were just as excited as you guys are, times about 100 people. You could barely hear yourself think, but I said, I will never forget where I came from. Ladies and gentlemen, I came from Middletown, Ohio. I am proud of it, and I will never forget where I came from. And in fact, I might make the Secret Service take me to Central Pastry afterwards to get some. I'm dead serious. They get nervous. They do not like unexpected. And I love Milton's too, of course. Both. I love both. But Milton's has expanded a little bit. I feel like you can get Milton's not just at the place that's there on what is that, Roosevelt? I feel like you can get Milton's anywhere now, or at least a lot of other places, so it's cast a wider net. Anyway, I'm gonna talk about donuts all day. You can tell what I skipped lunch, so my mind's on donuts here. But you know, I'll tell you another story. You know, my mamaw was just an incredible woman, and a lot of you knew her, and a lot of you knew her personally. And I talked at the RNC convention, and I'll repeat this story just because I think it illustrates how tough she was. That, you know, Mamaw died in 2005, and I was a United States Marine at that point, and I was just about to leave for Iraq. And when Aunt Wee and the rest of us went through her things, they discovered 19 loaded handguns in Mamaw's. That is not a made-up, no, that's. That's right, that's right. Well, you know, when she introduced herself, sir, she is an Appalachian American, and when she introduced herself to my uncle, my Aunt Wee's husband, for the first time, she said, I'm from Breathitt County, Kentucky, where a woman isn't fully dressed without her gun. So that was Mamaw's attitude. And you know, she was tough. And she was disciplined, and she is the reason why I've had so many of the good opportunities that I've had in my life. But people don't realize she was an incredibly sweet and kind and caring person too. And I'll never forget, I was probably 10 or 11 years old, and she picked me up from school, and there was just this very, you know, I'd never seen this person. She was probably 14 or 15, young girl who was sitting in the back of the car, and she was clearly a little freaked out. And I'm gonna get emotional telling this story. And I don't think that I've ever told this story before, but, you know, Mamaw said, I said, who is this person, you know, who's in our car? And Mamaw said, don't worry about it, none of your business. And I said, okay, I'll shut up. And eventually we dropped her off, and then we went back home, and I asked Mamaw, well, who was that? And she said, well, that was a little girl, and I guess there was some pretty bad abuse in her house. And when that little girl ran away from home and tried to find a safe space, she asked, where could I go? And everybody said, you can go to Bonnie Vance's house. And that is the Mamaw, but that is the Middletown that I knew. You guys were always so good to me. I could talk about any number of public school teachers, from Ron Selby to a number of others. I could talk about...
And that's J.D. Vance, the Vice President nominee, Vice President candidate, speaking at his first hometown rally in Middletown, Ohio. I will never forget where I came from. We'll cut back to that later on when it gets juicy. But let's move on now to earlier events in the day. And joining me now to discuss this is the author and the former Republican candidate for the US Senate in California, Tom Del Beccaro. Hello, welcome to the show. No, it's not that. We're joined now by the Democratic strategist, Hank Sheinkopf. Hank, welcome to the show. Right, I guess it's time. Right, so the big question is, can anybody beat Donald Trump? Kamala Harris has been polling significantly behind Joe Biden even. Donald Trump very rambunctious, as you'd imagine, today, saying Harris will be easier to beat than Donald Trump. What's your take?
My take is that nobody can beat him today, but who knows what the future holds. You know, 5 minutes in politics, as you certainly know in the UK, is 5 years in anything else, and anything can happen here. It's a long time until Election Day.
And what do you think we can expect from Kamala Harris? We were a bit disappointed today. She gave a speech on the steps at the White House. We were expecting the big-ticket sales device. We didn't get it, but we did have a little whiff earlier of the direction she might go in. She's painting herself, the former California Attorney General, as the good guy, taking down the bad guy, Donald Trump. The statement said, Kamala Harris stands up to fraudsters and criminals. Donald Trump is a convicted felon. It looks like the kinder politics, the unity politics, Hank, lasted approximately 1 week.
Well, even less, because yesterday or the day before, was it yesterday or the day before when Joe Biden said, I'm out, Donald Trump attacked him almost immediately, which set a different tenor for the campaign. Kamala Harris's problem, she's got to establish herself as someone who can be the commander-in-chief, the most powerful person in the universe. She's got to make people believe she can do the job. She's also got to put Democrats together, and they are in the United States. Like much of what has happened in the UK over the last few years, there are a bunch of clans or small groups who are fighting for some kind of power, and they're not sure what they stand for. That's problem 2. Problem 3, she's not believable on the migrant issue. And what Donald Trump will do is he will play her clips, what she said about migrants and immigrants, which is a big thing right now in the States and in the UK. It's a serious, serious issue. How is she going to get past this? What will happen is the Democrats will somewhat coalesce. There won't be chaos in Chicago at the convention if they can tolerate it. But the real reason they did this, because they would have lost both the Senate and they would have lost the House. They would have had no shot at taking back the House. And the shadow leader in the House, Hakeem Jeffries, and the leader in the Senate, the Democrat, Chuck Schumer, knew it. They acted swiftly, and they're putting coalitions together and telling their members, stand up for Kamala if you know what's good for you.
And Hank, do you think it's possible that she could do it? I mean, so far, she hasn't even been endorsed by Nancy Pelosi. She hasn't been endorsed by the Democrat kingmaker, the guy who many are saying is responsible for Joe Biden finally seeing sense and standing down. That man, of course, is Barack Obama, conspicuous by his silence.
I agree with you, and I think what they're doing here is what many politicians do, and you've certainly covered them. They're doing the dance, and it's kind of like Broadway or the West End, where the theater is opened. They're going to dance their way to a notoriety when and if they feel it's correct to keep the show going. Not a bad tactic. It keeps the excitement going. I think today Nancy Pelosi just now endorsed her, and we're going to see more Democrats stand up and say, by the way, let's be unified. And they're going to do it over the next week, would be my hunch.
Okay, superb. Thanks for joining us. Hank Scheinkoff, always a pleasure to have your company. Now, joining me now is the author and former Republican candidate for the US Senate in California, a man who stood against Kamala Harris, Tom Del Beccaro. Tom, welcome to the show. So you've stood against Kamala Harris. You've got the war wounds to prove it. Do you think she'd be a competent candidate? Do you think things could get dirty? Tell us more.
Well, a couple of thoughts here. It's one thing to be considered a possible candidate. It's a whole other world to be the actual candidate with the whole world focused on you. Her interviews will go up from a couple a day to many a day. And quite honestly, she doesn't think well on her feet. She, in the debates I had with her actually in California, which is very lopsided to the Democrat, I won the after debate poll. Because she couldn't answer questions, and I do better in that format, I guess. But number one, she's going to have to deal with a lot of press. Number two, she's never really run a campaign. And what do I mean by that? She was installed as the DA of San Francisco by Willie Brown. She ran unopposed for Attorney General. And then when she ran for U.S. Senate, she ran unopposed and didn't really have to work that hard. And then she ran for president, but did she really? Because I actually was the first to predict she wouldn't even make the gate and get into Iowa at all. She never entered any primaries. So now, in a crash course way, she is going to have to run for president with the whole world on her across the United States. So she's not particularly experienced at doing this sort of thing.
And Tom, her record, she was in charge of that southern border, the most porous border in all of America's history. The true numbers, I don't suppose we'll ever know, between 8 and 11 million estimated to have come through on Joe Biden's watch. So that's one automatic failure. And Tom, she's often lambasted for her word salads, the way she gives her delivery. Is this somebody that can actually get on point and take on Donald Trump? I mean, Joe Biden for all of his failings, at least he had the backbone, that, you know, he had that credence, that belief. Kamala Harris in a TV debate with Donald Trump, it would be a massacre, wouldn't it?
Well, it's funny. The left of center media here are lionizing her, saying, oh, she's an ex-prosecutor, she's going to be great at this. But actually, she isn't great on her feet. She does have problems. She also is on record for saying she wants to get rid of the Senate filibuster. So these are the reasons she has a 35% approval rating, which was lower than Biden's. And so they can try and blow her up as being so amazing, take her resume and create it, you know, into an amazing thing. That's what I mean, like blow up like on the screen and make her a star. But her actual reality of what she's done over the years is how she got to a 35% approval rating. Remember, even the Democrats in the primary didn't like her. So it's not as if she has this great track record and now she has to do it in a compressed way.
Tom, what's astonishing today, as well as painting herself as the cowboy in the white hat against the cowboy in the black hat, Donald Trump, she's also saying she's going to attack Donald Trump on his age. That's an astonishing thing to think, whereas until yesterday she was supporting Joe Biden. Nothing to see here, no drama about his age. Is that another example of the inconsistency? And the bigger question, Tom, is do you think the Democratic Party have been complicit in covering up for Joe Biden's deterioration?
Well, remember 4 years ago, he ran from the basement. He's been having troubles for years. And of course, they have known this. And the enabler-in-chief, as Trump calls her, has been hiding who she was, hiding who Biden was for a very long time. This went from the day after his inauguration. There's a famous scene of him signing executive orders where he says, what am I signing? And she says, just sign there. So what else do you need to know? But yes, it's silly for him to, unless she does it in a joking manner, saying, well, he's much older than me. But if that's their serious line of attack, then no, they're not going to get very far, because other than the very hard left base, no one buys that. They see Trump's energy. He just survived this attack, stood up with his arms. But you know what? There in America, we say they throw everything, but including the kitchen sink. They're going to have to throw everything at Trump because nothing they have so far has worked.
Well, they've tried the law, they've tried an assassination attempt. Maybe the kitchen sink is the last weapon in the locker. Tom Del Picaro, thanks for joining us on the show. Always a pleasure. Thank you. Now, coming up, as the Chancellor Rachel Reeves warns of tough decisions lying ahead, is Labour preparing for bombshell tax rises later this year?
Join me, Nana Akweer, for an informative, interactive news programme with a difference. It's fun.
It's true. You're not wrong. No one will be cancelled.
Lovely. Join me from 3 p.m. every weekend, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, Britain. Weekdays from midday.
An employment tribunal has found that a senior lawyer telling a legal secretary that she looked nice created an intimidating environment and made her feel violated.
Well, she's won her sexual harassment suit, so is saying someone looks nice acceptable in the workplace anymore?
Well, joining us now to debate this is political commentator Christine Hamilton, who thinks it should be, and author and journalist Rebecca Reid, who thinks making comments like these are unnecessary. OK, Rebecca, why is it unnecessary to tell your colleague they look nice?
Well, how somebody looks at work shouldn't be particularly important or relevant. But I think my issue here is that it's used as a sort of dismissive way to make women feel silly for complaining about things. Like, oh, it's just saying you look nice. Why does it matter? But we all know there are different ways of saying things. And if you are an older man in a position of power, looking a woman up and down and saying, oh, you look nice, in a lascivious tone, which, as far as we know, is quite possibly what happened, that's not acceptable. That's not workplace appropriate, and it would make somebody feel uncomfortable.
Christine, she's right, Rebecca, isn't she? It depends how it's said. If you've got someone who's sleazy saying, oh, you look nice, you're going to be a bit off-put, aren't you?
We don't know whether this was said in a lascivious tone or not. And as far as I can see, this particular case, the boss went too far and he did a lot of other things as well. But what worries me is that the Tribunal has ruled that just saying you look nice could be included as sexual harassment. Now, I think that is ridiculous.
Realistically, women don't make these accusations for fun. Women don't make these accusations to be difficult. They do it because they've been made to feel unsafe or unable to work in a certain place.
GB News, the People's Channel. Weekdays on GB News. Wake up to breakfast every day from 6 a.m. Followed by Britain's newsroom at 9:30. At noon, it's Good Afternoon Britain. Followed by Martin Daubney from 3 p.m. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Neil Oliver, every Sunday night at 6 p.m. on GB News. And if an hour is not nearly enough for you, go to gbnews.com for special extended episodes online every Friday at 9 p.m, where we can truly get into the nitty-gritty of what's going on. GB News, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to GB News Tonight with me, Martin Daubney. Now, we're just a few weeks into the new Labour government and already the sun is setting on that brief honeymoon period. Yesterday, the Chancellor, Rachel Reeves, warned of tough spending decisions lying ahead in the approach to the autumn statement. And with the Prime Minister, Keir Starmer, expected to sign off on above-inflation pay rises for nurses and teachers, the questions I'm asking tonight are, where is this money coming from? And will today's Skills England announcements make any difference whatsoever to the UK workforce? Well, joining me now in the studio to discuss this is the former Labour Party advisor and political commentator Matthew Torbett. Matthew, welcome to the show. Isn't the big problem is quite simple. The biscuit tin is empty. £2.7 trillion in national debt. And lo and behold, Rachel Reeves today, we're in the worst economic inheritance since World War II. She's already blaming the Conservatives, and this has all of the hallmarks of some painful tax rises coming. Pay rises, bumper pay rises to teachers and NHS staff. Is going to cost £3 billion every year. They're also talking today about the 2-child limit. That's another £3.4 billion a year. That's a lot of red ink on the ledger sheet. Where is the money coming from?
Well, the money tends to come from either rises in taxes or cuts to public spending. Now, and public services, considering there isn't much of local authority spending and public services left to cut, you can only assume there's going to be some level of tax rises. I've always thought it would be politically sensible and savvy to raise capital gains tax to the... Rachel Reeves actually wrote as a backbencher in a 2018 paper that she would like to see it rise to the levels of income tax. I think if she did that, it brings in about 18 billion quid. So if you want to talk about things like the 2-child cap, that's just over 3 billion. You want to pay the public sector workers the suggested inflation-busting pay rises that have been suggested by an independent body, that's 5.5 billion. You've got change to spare. And only 3 in 100 people currently pay capital gains tax at the current rate.
But isn't the problem we've seen historically, if you squeeze the pips out of the rich, they clear off? In the 1970s, when the Labour government had sky-high taxes, people like the Rolling Stones, the Beatles, they went to America, they never came back. The benchmark was set. Those who pay the most tax are unlikely to passively sit around and just take it.
Yeah, I'm not suggesting taxing the pips off people, but I think I'm always a believer in the strong helping the weak. And currently, you think about during the COVID pandemic, we had Amazon, supermarkets, Uber even to an extent, making mass profits everywhere. They've got by on what they've done up to now. The idea that there's places like supermarkets are still...
But they're international corporations. If you tax them out of the UK, they'll clear off abroad. We live in a globalised world, the kind of world that Sir Keir Starmer loves.
I agree, but when we've got an economy that's 80% service-based, I don't think they'll clear off at all. This is a huge market for people still. And I think, the idea that we're not going to have an Amazon in this country or these companies that do well, that are huge, conglomerates, I don't think will be the case. And I think they've done well to cosy up to business enough that they can get away with it.
What we could do is lower taxes. We could lower corporation taxes. Saw it in the Republic of Ireland. We've seen it in Cyprus. Brexit was meant to give us that ability to be nimble. That might attract investment in, so the tax take will be bigger, rather than increasing taxes and forcing people offshore. But that's not likely anytime soon, is it? Because Sir Keir Starmer is flashing his garter to the European Union every single day.
Well, Keir's very upfront about the fact that he was, a huge Europhile, and I think in many cases it's sensible to have a good relationship with the EU. How close that is will remain to be seen. And, I was always a believer, as a sort of reluctant Remainer, that I'd have been happy with things like EEA. I think why shoot yourself in the foot economically when you can leave the framework as it is? I think in an ideal world, everyone would like to lower taxes, but also, without sounding like a Conservative backbencher, the COVID pandemic has taken a huge hit to the public finances, and we've got to be straight up about that.
They were tax rises that Sir Keir Starmer wanted more of. He wanted sooner lockdowns, harder lockdowns, longer lockdowns. Isn't that the point? We've driven the economy to near bankruptcy through those lockdowns. Sir Keir Starmer was a big part of it. And now the only way back is tax rises, precisely what the Labour Party's critics warned would happen.
Yeah, but you've got to be clever with the tax rises. I've also seen Rachel Reeves apparently moot the idea of using pension pots to invest in long-term infrastructure plans, which I think is sensible because, pension plans...
Nationalising the rails, that could be like 190 billion.
Yeah, but again, they're trying to do it sensibly, I think, where you're letting whereas Jeremy Corbyn and John McDonnell would have bought them straight back in and it would have cost an absolute fortune. You're letting the contracts run out, you're letting them not go out to tender and just bringing them back in-house. It saves a lot of money in the process.
Well, let's talk about Sir Keir Starmer's Skills England package today to tackle Britain's fragmented and broken skills training system. Now, it stops short of Gordon Brown's British Jobs for British Workers manifesto pledge in 2009. But isn't the problem we have too much unskilled labour in Britain from immigrants coming in? And they're the ones who are doing the farm-picking jobs, manufacturing jobs. We haven't got a problem with skilled labour. We've got a huge problem with unskilled labour in huge amounts, and that's what's bankrupted the working classes.
I think that there's an element of that. I think... we don't have a problem at times with skilled workers because, as I've said earlier, there's no industry left. We see industries of a bygone era like steel in Wales just dying a death. I think if we're going to look at this long-term skills issue so that we're not reliant on migrant labour or whatever the politics Labour want to play with it is, there needs to be the right sort of skills and it needs to be looking at long-term. So what do we need for the future? We need skills of people that know how to build AI and harness that. We need skills in renewable and green energy, looking at cheaper bills, which GB Energy will probably be a big part of.
Well, we had £190 bill rises promised today. I spoke to a Labour Minister on energy last week. £300 drops in energy prices we were promised through cheap renewable energy and 650,000 jobs. Still no indication where those jobs are, what they'll pay or how you qualify for them. Isn't all this just, it sounds great, but it's just going to take too long to train up a workforce?
It's going to take time, which is why I think they've also rolled the pitch to talk about a decade of renewal. Keir Starmer's very well aware this isn't going to happen overnight. It's not going to even happen in a first term. It's going to take 2 terms minimum. And to enable to gain the patience of the public to buy into your ideas, you've got to let them know up front, which I think they are doing. I think the other problem is we talk about low-skilled. I think what we actually mean is low-wage. Like, this is what these sort of jobs are. The thing where I get worried, regardless of who the government is, how long is it until we're all low-skilled? If you look at things like Uber, whose whole mission statement is to have driverless cars, and people say AI is the future. It's here, it's happening, it's not the future, it's the present. How long until, we've got people presenting the news that are AI, or we're getting
a better job?
Some people may agree, not myself, I promise. But and how long is it until we're all seen as unskilled labour, and those qualifications we've got to gain are basically meaningless? And that's what worries me more about how does Labour harness AI. And there's a lot of talk about regulation. How are they going to ensure that happens?
How will AI help people that used to vote Labour many, many years ago? Like, I'm from Nottinghamshire, from the coal belt. So they were decimated by the influx of unskilled labour. Wages were driven down. The left used to stand up for a good, fair working wage for British workers. That's long gone because the Labour Party became addicted to cheap foreign labour. There's nothing that we've seen so far in terms of cutting down on that scale of immigration from Sir Keir Starmer. Perhaps we'll see it. Do we believe in miracles?
I don't know. I think regardless of who it is, I've always had a fear that the robots will take the jobs, right? It's happening, whether it be in supermarkets, whether it be on telephone sort of things. It's happening. And we have a choice to make as a society, whether you provide for people, whether that be through some sort of basic income or something where people are still feeling the benefits in their pockets but getting the benefit of technology.
So that's a big state. This is classic socialism. The Labour Party wants to expand the state, robots to take over, and you'll pay everyone to not work. That's what got us in this mess
But
during lockdowns.
The alternative is what? Is probably some element of neo-feudalism, where the 1%
What does that mean for people who haven't swallowed a dictionary?
Well, anyone that owns anything, which will be the real top earners, we live off the land. We pay to live off the land. There's no jobs left. So, what else do? You've got to just you work to survive, which is arguably what many people are out there doing now. So I think you make sure that all people are covered. You get rid of the welfare state. You need just ensuring people are getting a decent standard of living. That's where I fear that we'll head in the next 30 to 40 years.
A bright future of living off the farms, living in caves, while the robots take over and the richest get taxed to the hills and probably clear off abroad, and no industry comes in because the tax environment is too harsh.
So negative, man.
No, I'm just reading what you said, and I'm reading what's happening out there. Anyway, thank you very much for joining us in the studio, and that's the former Labour advisor and political commentator Matthew Torbett. Thank you very much. Pleasure. Now, still to come, some shocking exclusive figures on the number of asylum seekers entering the European Union in the last 5 years. You will not believe these figures, and you will not want to miss them.
Good evening. Here's your latest GB News weather forecast coming to you from the Met Office. For many, tomorrow looks like it's going to be a bit drier and a bit sunnier with that too. That being said, there will be some showery rain around. Most of today's showers are clearing away towards the east as we go overnight, but there is another system coming into the west and the southwest, and we are going to see further outbreaks of rain, which could be heavy, pushing across parts of Wales and also southwest England as we go overnight. Elsewhere, apart from a few showers towards the east-northeast, it's going to be largely dry, and there will be some clear skies around, but for many, another warm night. Temperatures, particularly in the towns and cities, holding up in the mid-teens Celsius. Some outbreaks of rain then first thing could be quite heavy across some southern parts first of all, originally around central southern parts, but the heavier bursts are going to push their way eastwards through the morning before clearing away. Elsewhere across much of England and Wales, a few showery bursts, but also some decent bright sunny weather first thing. Largely fine and sunny across Northern Ireland and many parts of northern England. Across Scotland, a bit of a westy split. Around eastern areas, it's going to be a bit cloudier, a few outbreaks of rain here, likely to be drier, brighter across more central and western parts of Scotland. Through the day then, we are going to see a scattering of showers here or there. Many places will actually avoid the showers and stay largely dry, but a few showers are possible and they could be a little bit on the heavy side, though I'm not expecting any thunder like we've seen through today. With a bit more sunshine around, temperatures are going to be a bit higher than they have been lately. Temperatures reaching highs of around 24, 25 Celsius, possibly even 26 Celsius. Any showers will die out as we go through tomorrow night into Wednesday, and Wednesday looks like it will start mostly dry. We can expect some showery rain pushing its way through across parts of Scotland and perhaps some showers kicking off over eastern parts of England, but elsewhere it's looking largely fine yet again before some very wet weather pushes in, particularly across southern parts as we go through Thursday. See you later.
Mark Dolan tonight is your weekend dose of news, debate and entertainment.
This sounds like a wild conspiracy theory.
Don't miss My Big Opinion, Mark Meets and My Take at 10.
Democracy is a funny old thing.
And we don't do boring, not on my watch. I just won't have it.
Go and get another glass of that bubbly, you've earned it.
That's Mark Dolan tonight, Saturday and Sunday, 9 to 11, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Are the newspapers getting you down?
My wife didn't divorce me that month.
Struggling to separate the wheat from the chaff?
I know that it's a bit of a circus at the best of times.
Well, don't worry, Headliners has got you covered. We'll take the burden of reading the day's news, and if we get depressed, who cares? It's an occupational hazard, frankly. That's Headliners on GB News from 11 p.m. till midnight, and the following morning, 5 till 6 a.m. on GB News, the comedy channel. Nah, just kidding. Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to GBN Tonight with me, Martin Daubney. Now, at present, J.D. Vance, the Vice President nominee for the Republican Party, is speaking in Ohio. And moments ago, he spoke about Kamala Harris. Let's take a listen.
4 months of me embarrassing you. That's what we do. But I just think when I consider how good this country has been to me, I just think about how much I owe to it. That gratitude should come with a sense of responsibility. And when I think about Kamala Harris, who I guess is our vice presidential candidate officially, but I guess she's going to run for president now because Joe Biden dropped out of the race. You know, when I see... I'm going to take bets here. We're going to start a betting pool just in this auditorium. But I wonder, when I see her give a speech, and she talks about the history of this country, not with appreciation, but with condemnation. And look, of course, every country, just like every family, certainly mine, has its pockmarks, right? Not everything's perfect. It's never going to be. But if you want to lead this country, you should feel grateful for it. You should feel a sense of gratitude. And I never hear that gratitude come through when I listen to Kamala Harris. And that's what we've got to do. Fundamentally, you're going to agree, hopefully, since you're here, you're going to agree, hopefully, with most of what President Trump and I want to do. We want to...
J.D. Vance there saying he never hears of appreciation, only condemnation from Kamala Harris. Now, moving on, today it's emerged that there were more than 1 million asylum applications, first-time applications, that is, in the European Union last year. The figure was 631,000 in 2019, and although it fell over the next 2 years, of course, due to COVID, it hit almost 1.05 million in 2023. That's an astonishing rise of 66%. Now, here to pour over those figures with me is a specialist immigration lawyer, Ivan Sampson. Ivan, welcome to the studio. Astonishing figures. Last week, it came out. These are, by the way, European Commission official data. This is the real deal. 1.265 illegal immigrants in the 27 European Union member states. Now, this is the asylum figures in 1 year, over 1.049 million, a further 1.17 million applications back in the system. Add all of that up, you got the thick end of 4 million people in the EU. And this report makes a damning conclusion. It's by Lee Evans from facts4eu.org. And it says that the European Union's asylum problem could become Britain's small boat nightmare. What's your take?
Well, I think we're going to take a lot of people out of those figures. And the problem is, even if they've claimed asylum in Europe, they can still come here and claim asylum again. So while they've got their asylum applications pending in whichever country they decide to claim, they can still make every effort to try and make another application here. And because there's no cooperation, we had that before under the Dublin Convention. When we left the EU, we should have been thinking about this and agreeing a treaty akin to that, so that a person cannot claim asylum twice. So that's the first point. The second point is that the UK has always been the choice destination for asylum seekers. Why? Because we have a fair asylum system. I hear stories from my...
Fair or soft?
Well, I describe it as fair because we consider the evidence, we make a fair decision. I'm talking about the courts, not the Home Office. The Home Office position is always refuse unless you can convince me otherwise. But our court systems, the whole world comes to the UK for justice. And that's the reason that many asylum seekers want to have that opportunity here, because they don't get that in the European Union.
And the figures also paint a picture. There are two destination countries, as you say, with that magnetism, simply for a better quality of life. They are Germany and the United Kingdom. You raise a key point there. The fact that an asylum seeker or an illegal immigrant can claim asylum in another member state, well, that's it. It's a fait accompli. That's not the case. No. They then are making their way towards the French coast, and they already have, if you like, that bureaucratic legitimacy.
Yes, it is. And look, If they're a failed asylum seeker, let's say, in one country, well, they can still come over here and claim asylum again. We need to have more cooperation with the EU. Another treaty, similar to the Dublin Convention, said if you've claimed asylum in the EU, in any EU country, you cannot then claim asylum here. You should be sent back to complete your claim. Or it's been rejected, well, your case has been determined.
Is that going to happen under a Labour government? There was new legislation talked about today by Yvette Cooper of fast-tracking those from safe countries, India, Albania, Vietnam. The problem is we have about a 70% acceptance rate. So we have 100,000 on our own backlog. Well, that means 70,000 getting in. Fast-tracking them won't send out a message to the people smugglers, don't come to Britain. It rolls out the red carpet.
Yeah, I hear you. Look, 95% of people claiming asylum are from 5 countries. We have no return agreements with those 5 countries. So even if we fast-track people to safe countries, I'm afraid when someone comes here and claims asylum and they refuse, what do we do with them? There's nowhere to send them.
So well, there was Rwanda, but that's been scrapped on day one of the Labour Party government. May have been a flawed plan, but it was a plan.
Yes, but it was never going to work because it was unlawful. And it was unlawful from the outset. On top of that, they tried to exclude judicial scrutiny. I mean, that's unheard of in our constitution, unwritten constitution.
And Ivan, lawyers like yourself must be licking your lips. This is the field day for you. This paints a picture of an endless wave of asylum seekers coming to our shores, a fast-track system which overridingly favours them remaining in Britain. It's absolutely not what people voted for in every single election, apart from the last one maybe, since 2010. You paint a grim picture of simply there's no way we can stop this tide.
No, there is a way. We need to have an agreement with the EU. Look,
so they'll expect something in return?
Yes. So the way to stop small boats is stop them getting in the small boats in France. There's no other way. Because once they set off and they're in our territorial waters, we have international treaty obligations under maritime law and the Refugee Convention to rescue them, to entertain their asylum claim, put them up in accommodation, feed them, put them through our appeal process, and at the end of it, we can't return them. So the only solution is a deal with the EU.
Or we could actually enforce our borders and do what we said all along. A final point to mention, Ivan Sampson, of all of these asylum figures, data and the illegal immigration, 82% are male, 82% male of all of these people going into the EU. And as this report concludes, the asylum problem in the EU is about to become our small boat nightmare. Thank you very much for joining us, immigration lawyer Ivan Sampson. Always a pleasure. Now, still to come, an extraordinary development on the weekend's IT shutdown, because Microsoft is now blaming the European Union for the fiasco. So did Brussels, caused the biggest blackout since the Blitz. That's up next.
I'm Christopher Hope. From pop stars to politicians, I'll interview anybody in a pub who's got a political opinion. Join me every Friday on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube or gbnews.com, or wherever you get your podcasts. This is GB News, the People's Channel.
GB News Breakfast, every day from 6 a.m.
Meghan Markle has reportedly finished filming her new show for Netflix. It aims to celebrate the joys of cooking, gardening, entertaining and friendship.
Yeah, this comes after Prince Harry's Netflix documentary, The Heart of Invictus, failed to hit the right note with viewers, missing out on the top 10 in the streaming charts.
So, will this next venture be a success? Well, joining us now is royal commentator Kinsey Schofield.
I know I've talked to the both of you about Meghan Markle potentially running for president, so this feels like a bit of a dud to go from Meghan Markle running for president to Meghan Markle's Netflix series about friendship and cooking. So she's wrapped this recent show. They rented a home near hers in Montecito, so that as their cooking set. And they're saying that this is really make or break for Harry and Meghan when it comes to their Netflix contract.
Do you think, Kinsey, it's fair to say that Meghan Markle has proved to be commercially a bit of a damp squib? Even in America, her native homeland, she's kind of Oprah without the audience when it comes to the cooking. Also, is she kind of, do you think, they saw her as the golden ticket, didn't they, to unlimited revenue, unlimited audiences, and it just hasn't happened.
Look, I think Meghan is a beautiful woman, and I do think she's talented, but I think how you treat people is incredibly important. And not only was she rumored to have been cruel inside Kensington Palace with several bullying allegations, but here in the States, Archwell Productions, their audio section, their scripted section, they've gone through several employees. And I think it's a reflection on the way that people are treated there. And I think as a viewer, you might get that. You might feel that way. And maybe that is where the appeal has been lost.
GB News, the People's Channel.
In the GB newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens.
With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK,
GB News brings you accurate reporting of the day's topical agenda.
When the news breaks, wherever and whenever it's happening,
we'll be there.
This is GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
Weekdays on GB News. Wake up to breakfast every day from 6 a.m. Followed by Britain's newsroom at 9:30. At noon, it's Good Afternoon Britain. Followed by Martin Daubney from 3 p.m. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
And welcome back to GBN Tonight with me, Martin Daubney. Now, Microsoft has blamed the European Union regulations for the world's largest IT outage caused by a faulty CrowdStrike update. The company claims a 2009 agreement with the European Commission restricted it from implementing security change that could have prevented the incident, which led to chaos, of course, in airports, doctors, surgeries and businesses globally. So, did Brussels cause the biggest blackout since the Blitz? You couldn't make it up. And joining me now to discuss this is someone who had her own flight delayed by the blackout, security expert and columnist Elizabeth Braw. Elizabeth, welcome to the studio. This is one of those studios, one of these stories, obviously, that gets me rather excited because meddling by the EU is to blame. Explain to us, if you could, why Microsoft has a beef with Brussels.
Brussels is the protector within the European Union of competition, and Brussels, namely the European Commission, has long felt that Microsoft is too dominant in the market. And I think we all remember when the European Commission told Microsoft that it wouldn't be allowed, or it mustn't have just its own browser on our laptops or indeed on our computers. And that's what the European Commission does. And it has also told Microsoft they mustn't just have its own cyber security program on its system. It must have alternatives, and this was one of the alternatives.
And what happened next is that external developers, such as CrowdStrike, were allowed access to the data, and then the chaos ensued. And for this reason, Apple and Google both refused to get into bed with Brussels because they said, we're the experts, leave it to us. You're the bureaucrats, don't meddle. QED, it's proof. Brussels got involved with Microsoft and they basically laid out the carpet for a cyber attack that Vladimir Putin would have been proud of.
He would have been proud of it, but I think this is a cheap shot by Microsoft. It is a good thing that the European Commission looks after competition to make sure there are no monopolies in the European Union. And rather than telling the world, our supplier, namely CrowdStrike, got it wrong this time, we will make sure that they do a better job this time, or otherwise we won't do business with them. Rather than being upfront and honest, Microsoft then tries to take a cheap shot, it sounds like, at the European Union. And I think what Microsoft should have done, and will hopefully do, is to say, well, we got it wrong this time, and we'll do it much better next time. And that would strengthen Microsoft's position, because then he would be able to say, look, we have done everything we can. We don't try to get away from any responsibilities, and we act in the interests of our users, be they companies, be they ordinary consumers like me who were left stranded.
Except Microsoft are saying if Brussels hadn't got involved, if they'd left it to the experts, then third parties like CrowdStrike wouldn't have been able to go in and make the updates, which did this fatal system crash. So I'll put it to you again. And sorry to be persistent, but it's absolutely true. If Brussels hadn't meddled with Microsoft, this wouldn't have happened.
The problem is CrowdStrike. One of the companies out there on the market made a mistake, and mistakes will happen. And I put it to you again, Vladimir Putin will exploit such vulnerabilities. So I'm not saying it's a good thing we had this incident, but it's a good thing that we learned what can happen when systems go down, and hopefully we'll be better prepared for it next time. And maybe we can thank the European Commission for that.
Isn't that astonishing? And thank you very much, Elizabeth. And in the wings here, we're going to hear Jacob Rees-Mogg cackling away slightly and licking your lips anyway, the anticipation of the fact that... Isn't it astonishing, Jacob? Of course, State of the Nation is up next, and I know you're going to be covering this story. It's simply too irresistible to ignore. Meddling from Brussels has paved the way to show how hostile partners, hostile actors from outside of Britain could bring our country to a grinding halt.
Yes, it shows that Brussels doesn't really understand competition, and it should never have been given responsibility for it, because the integrity of computer systems is really important. And it's one thing to say that Apple ought to allow other apps to appear on its iPhone. It's quite another to say that the fundamentals of a system should be written by a third party. It's ignorance in Brussels, failure of Brussels, and thank heavens we're no longer a member. And I hope that the UK government, His Majesty's government, will not bully companies to do things that harm passengers. And I mean, hundreds of thousands of people were stranded because of this. Missed flights, flights had to be reorganised.
Although that may be wishful thinking, seems like at the moment David Lammy, Sir Keir Starmer would like to do all these kind of piecemeal deals with the European Union on things like immigration, on things like data sharing. Aside from this story, what else you can
Well, there's a terrible bill in the King's Speech about copying Brussels regulation, which I hope this disaster will remind people not to do. But my main thing I'm going to be talking about is Joe Biden and the lies that were told to the American people by the left, and the fact that the president was a puppet. So people voted for a president, and then he was operated by people behind the scenes, the infamous blob.
And who do you think that Democrat blob is? Barack Obama has been very instrumental, it would seem, in Joe Biden standing down. Very, very conspicuous by his absence in giving the blessing to Kamala Harris.
But this is what's undemocratic about it, because you don't know. So you vote for one person who is there and is meant to be the leader of the free world, the leader of your nation, the head of state, and you find, in fact, it's a cabal of people behind him who are operating things when he's simply not in a mental state to do it. And that's so undemocratic. You vote for one thing and you get another. No wonder Donald Trump is so popular.
The Kamala cabal. Quickly, we've got about 20 seconds. Do you think that Kamala Harris has any chance of stopping the Trump train?
The Trump train is the Express, isn't it? It's the Flying Scotsman, and he's got Scottish heritage, hasn't he? He is the Flying Scotsman of American politics.
So you think there's no chance of Kamala Harris touching Trump?
Very unwise to predict election results, but Trump is steaming ahead.
I'll take that as a yes. Thank you very much. Thanks for joining me in the studio. Jacob Rees-Mogg, of course, State of the Nation is up next. I'll be back tomorrow, 3 till 6 p.m. But first, it's your weather with Alex Burrow.
Looks like things are heating up. Boxed boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Good evening. Here's your latest GB News weather forecast coming to you from the Met Office. For many, tomorrow looks like it's going to be a bit drier and a bit sunnier with that too. That being said, there will be some showery rain around. Most of today's showers are clearing away towards the east as we go overnight, but there is another system coming into the west and the southwest, and we are going to see further outbreaks of rain, which could be heavy, pushing across parts of Wales and also southwest England as we go overnight. Elsewhere, apart from a few showers towards the east-northeast, it's going to be largely dry, and there will be some clear skies around, but for many, another warm night. Temperatures, particularly in the towns and cities, holding up in the mid-teens Celsius. Some outbreaks of rain then first thing could be quite heavy across some southern parts first of all, originally around central southern parts, but the heavier bursts are going to push their way eastwards through the morning before clearing away. Elsewhere across much of England and Wales, a few showery bursts, but also some decent bright sunny weather first thing. Largely fine and sunny across across Northern Ireland and many parts of Northern England. Across Scotland, a bit of a westy split. Around eastern areas, it's going to be a bit cloudier, a few outbreaks of rain here, likely to be drier, brighter across more central and western parts of Scotland. Through the day then, we are going to see a scattering of showers here or there. Many places will actually avoid the showers and stay largely dry, but a few showers are possible and they could be a little bit on the heavy side, though I'm not expecting any thunder like we've seen through today. With a bit more sunshine around, temperatures are going to be a bit higher than they have been lately. Temperatures reaching highs of around 24, 25 Celsius, possibly even 26 Celsius. Any showers will die out as we go through tomorrow night into Wednesday, and Wednesday looks like it will start mostly dry. We can expect some showery rain pushing its way through across parts of Scotland and perhaps some showers kicking off over eastern parts of England, but elsewhere it's looking largely fine yet again before some very wet weather pushes in, particularly across southern parts as we go through Thursday. See you later.
A brighter outlook with Box Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
£30,000 in cash has to be won. It's our biggest cash prize so far and it could be yours. Charles was a winner. Listen to what he says about winning the Great British Giveaway.
I'm Charles. I won £18,000 cash. It was just amazing, and as soon as it goes into your bank account, it just changed. It's a life-changing thing.
The next big winner could be you, with an extra £30,000 cash in your bank. For another chance to win £30,000 in tax-free cash,